So we're going to be talking about strategies for teaching the gifted student. And so the idea is that I've kind of thrown things from different subjects with connections. I don't necessarily hit yours in the same way, but hopefully it'll spark something that will give you some ideas. And so the biggest question I get is why identify gifted kids? Well, the thing is they're gifted whether we recognize it or not. So why identify them? There's very, very good reasons for doing that. First of all, they need our support. So there are what I call side effects to being gifted, like OCD, being socially awkward. I'm sure you've seen that. They have a fear of failure, laziness, anxiety, being argumentative, self-harm. And some of these kids, if they can identify why do I feel this way, why am I OCD, why do am I obsessive about the textures of my clothing, why, and not every gifted kid is obviously this way, but sometimes when you can give them a reason, it makes sense. And as a parent, I didn't know a lot of these things about my son when he was younger, and it would have really kept so many arguments from happening because I would have understood and been able to walk through those instead of just put that shirt on because I said so. And there was a reason why he felt a certain way. So sometimes when you can explain to them, your brain functions a different way, and we're going to figure this out. And so now my son's OCD, he's using this, and it helps him when he's studying for his engineering degree because he's able to use that OCD to his benefit. So we can hopefully help them learn strengths from that, or even help them figure out, okay, this is how to make friends. I know one year I made kids at lunch, I wouldn't let them take their books to lunch because I had the gifted kids for lunch, and they were so angry with me, but their social skills were terrible. And so it forced them to talk to the people across from them. So I would, one day a week, they were not allowed to take their books. And at first they pushed back, but after that they started to accept it, and it helped them socially. Also, when we have gifted kids that aren't identified, a lot of times they have behavior issues. They melt down or self-destruct when they're finally challenged. So if they're never challenged, when they finally get a challenge, they buck at it and they don't want to do it. And a lot of them even end up quitting school because they don't want to be challenged. And another bonus, and this is not the driving force, but it's still something that's worth mentioning. We get state funding for every gifted kid that's identified gifted who is in a classroom with an identified gifted teacher or certified gifted. We get funding from that. And we all know that any funding we can get for the school helps. So there's also just a financial benefit to it. I'm going to read this quote directly because I really like it. According to the National Research Center on the Gifted and Talented, gifted students need exactly what all other students need: consistent opportunity to learn new material and to develop the behaviors that allow them to cope with the challenge and struggle of new learning. They should never feel like their school day is wasted. And so if we're not challenging them, it's not fair to them. So a lot of gifted kids feel like they're being punished for being smart, or they feel like they're being overlooked. If you ask some of them that haven't been challenged, they'll tell you that. Or they'll say, I just feel like I'm being punished. So this is a big one. When I went through my gifted certification, this really sunk into me, and I've made sure to never to do this. We should not ask them to teach or tutor struggling students. It's not their job to do our job. And so that is a big use of what gifted kids, I have them tutor, I have them mentor. And now that's not to say that, during study skills, if they thrive off that, of bringing them in and letting them mentor, some of them thrive off of that. But if you said, hey, can anyone show so-and-so? Some of those kids, because they're pleasers, are going to do it every time, even when they really don't want to, because they know you need them to or want them to. And so they're the ones that are going to go and do it. So, and some of them are being asked to do it on a consistent basis, and that is their only enrichment they get, is teaching someone else. Also, they shouldn't be given just free time, drawing time, reading time every time they finish. That doesn't mean you can never do those things. They work hard, they deserve to have a downtime as well, but not every time they finish. Because if they should finish early. They should be going at an accelerated pace. They should finish before everyone else. So if you think about it, if they finish early and they're constantly getting drawing time, socializing time, or reading time, they may actually spend more of their academic day doing non-new academic material by the end of the day. So we want to make sure that we're giving them things to fill their time to challenge them. Also, don't ask them to do more problems when they finish early. They should actually be doing less. So if you're teaching a math concept, for example, If you give them the most complicated piece, or say in band, if you have this piece of music and they're a quick learner, and they could be gifted in music, by the way, and not academically gifted. The giftedness is, you're not necessarily gifted in every area, obviously, but give them the most complicated. If they can master the most complicated thing, there's no reason for them to do the easy stuff, okay? So once you give them the most complicated and they can show you that they can do it, then you can challenge them and they can be doing, so instead of doing, hey, here's the 20 problems everyone else has to do, then I give them the hard ones first, see what they're able to do. And so once they show competency, then's when you can give an alternate or a challenging assignment. Obviously, we still have to teach the standard that they need, but it may be assessed differently than other kids. Sometimes you can pull those kids even and say, hey, explain to me this right here, instead of having them, do certain work that other kids need to do for reinforcement. Also, don't force them to stay at the same pace. They're going to become bored and they're going to eventually resent school. There's 2 effective gifted models. There's more than 2 for middle school. There's one that's not an effective model, but the 2 most effective are the ones I'm going to look at and show you guys. And you don't always have control over how your classes align. Like, for example, my high school credit science class, I only have gifted and advanced students in there. I don't have any remedial kids. I don't have any kids that, now some of them still struggle, but so I am able to do something different with that class than when I have classes where there are a combination of kids. So there's 2 models that we have. The first is cluster grouping, and that's when you have a group of kids in your room and you have identified some, and I use gifted and advanced interchangeably. As a mother of one child who's gifted and one child who's advanced, and the advanced kid outperformed my gifted kid, I see both aspects. And so we have to, some of them don't identify gifted, but when you know that they're still an advanced learner, you can still group them with those gifted kids. There's no rules that say that you cannot. For cluster grouping, what you don't do is you don't group a remedial student, for example, or even a grade level student with this group. So like, let's say I have a group of kids and maybe I have some special ed kids and some regular ed, and then I have my advanced kids. So cluster grouping would take those kids and you would put them together to do work. Sometimes they're still doing individual work, but that you're gonna do something different for them than the rest of the kids. And if you are gifted certified and you're doing cluster grouping, we have to show in our lesson plans what we're doing different for those gifted kids in order to be accountable for when we're audited. Advanced content is when everyone in your class is advanced, and you still do some differentiation, of course, in there because everyone has different needs, but that's when your whole group is advanced and you can advance the entire class. So, cluster grouping. The benefits of cluster grouping is that when you can have multiple advanced students, when you have that one kid that is finishing early and they're the only kid in your class that's really getting it, it becomes it's hard to enrich that one kid because they're alone and then they don't have anyone to play off of. So when you have multiple kids at the same level or a similar level, they can play off of each other, they can work together, they can challenge each other. Also, when you're the only smart kid in the class or one of the only smart kids in class, and I use smart very loosely, obviously, you know what I mean? And you're the kid that always has the answers, eventually you become obnoxious to the other kids and you actually start to develop this overinflated ego because you're the one that always wants to answer out loud. And so when you have another group of kids that are equally on the same level academically, and every kid is smart, so I use that term very loosely, but when you've got a group of kids that are all academically similar, you start to realize, hey, I'm not always the smartest kid in the room. I can learn from other people as well. And so it starts to help them realize and develop those social skills. They're able to thrive together. Advanced content is great because you can actually teach alternative curriculum, whether it's the same curriculum that everyone else has and then advancing it, or whether it's so you can adapt it, or whether it's different curriculum. And all of our standards don't allow for that, but like for my high school credit class, they are on a different track completely. They learn different material than the 8th grade credit class. They are getting that plus so much more. And then maybe it is, for ag, where they're getting completely different content. If you're able to pull those advanced kids, they're getting something that's beyond what the other kids are getting. You can also just teach the same material at a faster pace. And you can go with the accelerated teaching strategy, which I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Or you can stay on the same pace and just go one step further with the curriculum. And all of these things can also be added in the cluster model. So a lot of things are interchangeable between the two models. So what my goal is just give some examples and strategies and ideas for differentiation. There's a lot on these screens, and I can share this later. But it's just a list of ideas. So for example, if you're doing math, you could give the same math type questions, but where everyone else only has to do whole numbers because that's what the standard says, your advanced kids are doing fractions, or they're doing decimals, or they're doing negative numbers. Or where everyone else has a one-step problem, they're getting a two-step problem. Or where when you give the problem, you're saying, I want you to explain why this is this way, prove it to me. Even doing like math puzzles, encouraging that encourage higher order thinking. They can also learn about someone or something that goes beyond the standards. We get so locked into standards that we forget that we don't have to just teach the standards. Standards are bare minimum. We're allowed to go beyond that. So maybe their standard did not cover this particular battle, and so you say, okay, you have to go find a battle that we did not learn about from this war, and I want you to research it, and I want you to present it. And so giving them something that goes beyond that the other kids aren't getting. And then like with my 8th grade class, science students don't have to learn how to balance chemical equations. They just have to be able to recognize. So those kids, I've always taught them how to balance equations. So you can take the standard and just broaden it. You could teach them how to debate and allow them to debate a topic that goes with your standards. If you're learning about the parts of the heart, then afterwards have them create an infographic to show heart disease and the dangers of heart disease. And so then the infographic, that runs a whole other thing. What's an infographic? How do I create it? So they have the creative skills, then they have to realize, oh, I gotta find data, and I have to find percentages, and I have to find numbers. And so it gives them, it's not just a report, it's something that goes beyond a report. Or like with sports, let your gifted athletes, let them create a game. Okay, you know what? Next week, I want you're gonna lead a game and you're gonna create it. And you can bring things together from multiple sports, but you're gonna create the game, or you're gonna take this game and adapt the rules. So let them create something and let them then show it to the rest of the class. Accelerated teaching is one of my favorite things to do. Your gifted kids should go at a faster pace. And it's not that it's going to be more difficult. If you think of it this way, we've seen the meme that it says that fair isn't equal, and we see where this short kid needs a stool to reach the water fountain. That was always me. And then this other kid who's just a normal height can reach it easily. And so by giving this kid a step up, okay, like we do with our struggling kids, by giving them a step up, we're not giving them an unfair advantage, we're making it fair. Well, it's kind of the same thing with gifted. Gifted would be kind of like you got the giant who's trying to lean down and drink from the water fountain. They're far beyond that water fountain. So they should be able to easily, so the thing is that they're going to be at an accelerated pace, so they should go faster. And you're gonna have a kid here or there that you might have to pull aside, just like any other kids, and say, hey, let's reteach this, let's relearn this, and then you can join back in. Or come to me, do what they're doing, but come to me during your study skills or whenever, and let's work on this. But one of the things I loved to do was, I would teach in 4 days what everyone else was doing in 5 days. And so my Friday was open. And so what I would do on Fridays is I would have an ongoing project that may or may not, and usually didn't align with my standards. Or you could also do the same method where the first or last 20 minutes of every class every day, you're giving them this ongoing project or assignment. And what's great about it is that, and I would usually try to do like 6 weeks at a time, so maybe every quarter, try to do a 6-week worth assignment. That way, if you really want to test on Fridays and you don't want them to test on a different day than everyone else, then it's okay. That Friday you don't do the accelerated day. But so here are some just ideas that I've used in the past. So one year, Ms. Jackson came to me at our librarian at the time and said, hey, I really want to do something with the classroom. Would you be willing? So what we did was, we learned a little bit about volcanoes in 6th grade. I taught 6th grade at the time. So what we came up with was, we had the kids build this volcano, but then what they did was we erupted them multiple times, and then they would trace the patterns, and they studied the patterns of multiple eruptions of volcanoes. So every Friday for a series of like 6 weeks, we would come into the library and she and I would partner together. So think co-teaching, but co-teaching with advanced kids. So instead of you're going around helping kids who don't understand, you're now helping and you're questioning them, and you're pushing them beyond what the standards are. And so it was really great because we were able to play off of each other and work together on that. Another thing you could do is create like a grade level newspaper that is created once a month. So maybe you say, okay, the last week of every month you're going to put out a paper. So your job during those months on those Fridays is you're going to interview, you're going to come up with what the articles are. You give them jumping points, but they should be the one that's leading it. And then let them create a newspaper, let them interview, let them create stories of interest around the school, different things that they could do. In our competition, one year, I had my students join the 3M Young Scientist Challenge. It is a national challenge, and the reward for it, we didn't win it, but the award for it was major. But what was really cool is that what they had to do was take some situation where that needs to be fixed. And so, like, for example, one girl said, I am colorblind and I hate that I can't see certain things. So what her thing was is and they don't have to actually create it, they just have to design, like talk about how the design would be and adapt it, what are the needs for it, what would be, and research it. But she had come up with an overlay that you could put on the front of the screen of a computer that would allow the things to show in the correct color. And so she was able to figure out that there were some things like that existed, but then she was able to take it a little bit further to adapt to the needs that she wanted. So it was really cool to see with these kids, and then they had to do a video presentation and record it and upload it, and that's how they entered the competition. So it was amazing to see what some of these kids came up with. Also, abandon your standards completely. They've learned it. They don't need it anymore. So if you want to, so like I've taught forensic science before, where we learn how to look at DNA, how to look at fingerprints, how to look at a crime scene, and then set up a whole crime scene with all these different things in there for them to investigate and figure out who had created this, who had done this crime. Learn about the Titanic. It's not on our standards, but the kids are fascinated by that. Origami, cursive writing. These are all things that are beyond the standards that they could do on those Fridays that are still enriching activities. Diagramming sentences, mathematical proofs, creating a newscast, performing a skit, creating and selling products, science projects, teaching interview skills, and then teach them the interview skills and have them, each month you're going to bring someone in and you're going to interview them. Independent study. You get to study whatever you want to, and you got to tell me, but for this 6 weeks or however long you're going to do it, this is your content, and you're going to have you can let them, in the end, they can do a presentation or they can do a slideshow, whatever, you could choose for them, or you could let them choose. There's so many things that you can do that are outside the standards. And when you do the accelerated teaching, wow, things that you can do, because you're opening an entire day up for you to do that. And to do accelerated teaching, they don't need to do all the practice. They don't need reteaching. They don't need repeating in the same way. So, and people, what about the kids with ADHD? Guess what? They're going to have to figure it out from hearing it 1 or 2 times anyway. They have to figure that out. They're going to have to, and so they'll start to adapt to it. In the beginning, they'll push back, but then they'll start to adapt and figure it out, whether they borrow someone else's notes or whether they, and that doesn't mean they can't meet with you separately, but there's no need to reteach an entire class because 1 or 2 kids aren't paying attention. 90% of those kids got it the first time, and they don't need it anymore. And they don't need to do the same, they don't need to work on vocabulary 5 times. You say to them, study this vocabulary, you're having a vocabulary test tomorrow. Most of them got it the first time you taught it, and then the other few that didn't will study it, and then you'll have a few that don't do well, and they'll have to relearn it and reassess, but then it opens your Fridays up, or whatever day of the week you choose, in order to do these accelerated lessons. So, strategies for differentiating. Use Bloom's taxonomy, where you might say to this class, explain what a democracy is. You might say to this next class, okay, I'm going to come around with a hat, and you're going to draw a form of government out of the hat, and you're going to have to look at your entire day and tell me how your day would be different if we were under this form of government. And so at first they're like, well, there would be a king or a queen, but then they have to start thinking, how would school look different? How would my sports activities look different? How would my family look different? How would my housing look different? How would our health insurance? So it pushes them beyond, and then it's not just them understanding, they have to think beyond what what those words mean. Giving them a choice board, but make theirs different. So one of the things I like to do when I had a class with multiple levels is I would pass out a paper with 6 things on there, and I'd hand them out. But what they didn't know is I might be giving you one level, and you one level, and you one level, and I give everyone a die, and I say, roll your die, and the first 3 numbers you roll, circle those numbers on your paper. Those are the 3 activities you're gonna do. So yours might be, I want you to write a sentence with a subject and a predicate, and punctuation and capitalization. Yours might say, I want you to write a well-developed 5-sentence paragraph. Yours might say something totally different. So they're doing the same concepts, but you don't need to write a structured sentence because you can do that. So you need, good job. So you need more than that. And so, so you're giving them, or it might be that I come to this child over here and say, listen, because I know theirs is harder. So I might say, hey, guess what? You circled 3 numbers, you only have to do 2. Because what I know is one of theirs was that they're going to write a short story, or they're going to do something that's a little more involved than what this other student's is. So I might just go and, just like we do with our other end of the spectrum, we go, hey, everyone else is doing 4, you're gonna do 2. So it just goes the other way. So so we can adapt that. So it's not that I'm gonna give her, you have to do 4 because you're smart. You have harder stuff, but I don't necessarily want to tell her that, or I might, doesn't matter. And say, so you're just gonna do 2 of them. Offer assignment choices that appeal to multiple intelligences, but I will say oftentimes force them, and I say that in quotation marks, to do the things they don't want to do. So sometimes they don't, when you notice that nobody wants to do a presentation the other day, I offered an assignment, there were multiple intelligences. No one chose to do a presentation. So guess what? The assignment that they're doing tomorrow, every single group has to do a newscast. And that's how they have to present what they learned in their material. Because I saw that they're safe when they're writing, they're safe when they're creating something that they can sit in front of their screen. They don't feel safe when they're standing up and talking. So guess what? It's a very safe environment in my room. So now you're gonna get up here and you're gonna struggle and you're gonna feel awkward, but there's no one here gonna heckle you. Well, maybe me a little, but no, but there's no one gonna heckle you, there's no one gonna make fun of you, there's no one gonna bottom your grade out because you're struggling with a presentation, but you're gonna stand up here and you're gonna do a newscast in front of the class, and you're not gonna have a slideshow behind you, you're gonna have you and your little note cards in front of you, and you're gonna do a newscast to present something that they're learning. So sometimes I like to do the opposite extreme. When I see what no one wants, that's when I add that in just to help develop those skills a little bit. When available, offer the reading material on different levels, especially science and social studies. So many things offer different levels. You can find articles online, or you can even find the same article offered. We used to have News LA, and they would offer the same article on multiple levels. So when you can do that as well. Don't answer all their questions, and that's for any subject. When they ask, hey, I had someone ask a really good question the other day, and it's okay to say, I don't know, that's a good question. But when they ask you, then you know what? You go look that up and you come back and you tell me. And if it's something that's relevant to the whole class, you go look it up, and I want you to tell everyone in the class when you figure out what the answer is. That's also a great strategy when you don't know the answer. It's just, pretend like you're just giving them a challenge, and then, they get to look it up. And then give the same assignment but with different expectations, just like a minute ago. So like if I'm giving something for you to write, it might be that for you, I'm really looking at your organization of your writing, but for you, I'm looking at the voice, how you write it, and I'm looking at your advanced vocabulary. So I'm looking with different expectations, and so people are like, well, is that fair? Yeah, it's fair. So if the standard says they need to be able to write a good paragraph, which I know that's beyond what we're doing, but then of course I'm going to give her the grade she deserves on that. But then it's not that I can have to assign a grade to that, but when I pull her, I want to say, hey, listen, your paragraphs, your sentences, they're great. We don't even need to focus on that because you just keep doing what you're doing, but here's what I want you to focus on, okay? You struggle with voice, or you struggle with using some advanced vocabulary or imagery, and so that's what you're gonna work on. And the thing is because kids who do well, though they like to be complimented, they also don't want to hear all the time, good job, good job, good job, good job. If they get used to hearing that, they're gonna think everything they do is good. And the first time someone says, hey, let's do something different here, they're gonna struggle with that. But the second thing is they want to get better. Even if they don't know they want to, they want to. And so, and it's the same with sports. When you go to some kid who, I've got one kid here who can barely serve a ball. So if they like even make contact with the ball, good job. You got another kid who just served this amazing serve, but it goes out every time. I'm not gonna say, like this kid, I'm like, you know what, you could make contact with that ball. This kid, I'm gonna talk to them differently because they're beyond that. They need something else. And if I don't help them where they're at, then I'm cheating them out of becoming a better student. And then there's 4 different areas that we can do differentiation, and this goes for anything. And so this can go across any curriculum content, which is obviously what's being taught. I can alter the content. The process, how they're getting the information, whether it's me teaching, whether it's them researching and teaching. Sometimes I like to say, okay, you guys are gonna read that page, you're gonna read this, and you're gonna teach this to the class, brand new concept. You guys read that page, you guys read that page, you're gonna read that, and then they have to teach. And of course I fill in the gaps for them, but it's a different method for them to learn. The product, how the student will demonstrate their understanding, whether it's, whether it's playing a piece of music versus, hey, you are so good at playing this music, how about you go home and just write even the simplest piece of music, okay? And I don't know what that would look like at that level, and it may be very scary, I don't know. But it could be that you're saying, hey, go home and try this. Or you know this kid can sing this amazing song and say, okay, I'm gonna give you something that's gonna be a challenge for you, but I want you to try it. And so just giving them that. And then of course their learning environment. So whether that is the different room or whether that is the different grouping. It's so good to put your advanced kids together. They get tired of taking care of the kids that don't do well. It doesn't mean that they don't want to, it doesn't mean that but sometimes they're tired of it. And so they like to be with kids that also are able to shine. And that doesn't mean that there's not other times you can group them different ways, but give them a chance. When you have this great athletic team and you throw this one poor little kid that can't do anything, the kid that you throw over there, they feel out of place, and those kids feel like they have to take care of them or they ignore them. It can go either way. But what's great about it is when you take, like in the cluster model, when you take these kids over here and they're working on something, now guess what? Somebody else over here that isn't gifted or advanced gets to shine, because now they're not here to answer the question. They rely on them to answer questions, and they know they will. So guess what? They're not gonna raise their hand and probably not even gonna think about the answer because they know Johnny over here is gonna answer that question. So what's great about when you pull them aside or in a different classroom is it gives someone else a chance to step up and be the leader in the classroom. It also gives them a chance to realize that they're not always the brightest one in the room. And also one of the things I put in here I didn't hit was schedules need to be changed in order to do what's best for the kid. An advanced kid that is just like flying, they do not need to be in an inclusion classroom. And so when you see a kid is far beyond, and I'm not talking about behaviorally, I'm talking about academically. When you see a kid is far beyond and there's no like-minded kids in that classroom, they can be inclusion and you've got this group over here that's able to thrive together. But when you got that 1 or 2 kids, clusters should be 4 at minimum, but 6 to 8 is a good number. But when you see a kid that's thriving, they need out of that inclusion or even that regular ed classroom that they're not thriving in, because if they're head and shoulders above everyone else, we're not benefiting them. The office has always been really great about allowing schedule changes whenever you see that. And it's few and far between that it's that drastic, especially when we look at numbers and stuff, putting kids in a classroom. And then there's some resources here, and I do have this link that I can share out, just different ways to enrich and do gifted and different strategies. So these are just some good resources. And there's another resource also embedded in earlier. But so I know I like talk nonstop because I'm a talker, sorry.